y'all, I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate. We're Real Estate Elevated, and today we're bringing you a new series on new construction. We're going to talk through all the different avenues of finding a home within an existing neighborhood, as well as finding raw land, and kind of how to pick through the information that's most important when you're getting into a contract. So we're going to take you from start to finish in the world of new construction. So the first big thing that we need to talk about is the difference between buying a lot from a builder versus buying raw land. So when I say raw land, I'm talking about an isolated location that you've kind of found on your own. Typically, it still looks very rural, undisturbed. There's lots of existing trees, or even potentially buildings that have been left behind on site. So when you have a lot that a builder has actually spliced out and determined, so think existing neighborhood, there's definitely going to be people right within that proximity to you, whether it's an acre or a tenth of an acre. Those lots have already gone through a lot of steps that if you buy raw land, you're going to have to do on your own. So one of the biggest things is soil suitability. The builder's already determined if that's potentially going to be a good location for a home. Sometimes if you're looking at a site map and you see something that says designated open space, sometimes that was actually a location they had intended on putting a house and were unable to because of the soils, or they needed to not disturb the soils in that one location to help keep the soils in place in the surrounding lots. So those lots are already intended for building usage. So when you're trying to evaluate a lot, you want to think, where do I want to be within the neighborhood? Do you want to be up front so there's easy access, less traffic, and less time to get from in the neighborhood to where your home is? There are some neighborhoods that you could drive for miles before you actually get to your house because they were intended to be spread out. Or you may want to live in the back of the neighborhood. It could be for privacy. It could be that the estate lots or the bigger homes are towards the back. Typically, when you're designing a community, you'll put those townhomes in the smaller lots up front and then get a little bit more expansive as you grow. So that might be something to consider, as well as your proximity to amenities in the neighborhood. Do you want to be near the neighborhood pool? Some folks would say yes, especially if you have small humans and you want to be able to easily walk down there. For other folks, they want quiet and they don't want to hear everything that goes on from May to September, which are typically our pool months here. So something else to look at when you're thinking of raw land. So that was lots. When you're looking at raw land, you want to see what is still on the property. In an existing neighborhood that a builder is building in, they're going to be responsible for the removal of trees or any kind of existing things that might be left behind. But with raw land, it's typically going to fall on the buyer to have that added out-of-pocket expense. It's not going to be wrapped into the total that you've already gotten from your builder. So you want to think about the value add that some of those resources may have. Some folks, when they see trees, are like, great, let's cut those trees. I can donate them for somebody to build. If they're not the right type of wood, you may not get any kind of value out of it. It might just be a deficit and just the removal costs that you're going to deduct. The second thing to look at is topography. So on a GIS map, you can actually pull the increase or decrease in elevation. So to look at how much of a drop off or slope or a rise in elevation that you actually have on the land. If it's a slight slope, that's fine. You can easily grade it. You can level it out. If it's a little bit more of an incline, you may actually have an opportunity to do a basement home, which again is very costly here in North Carolina. We have a lot of rock, a lot of granite specifically. The soils are a little bit different here, so don't think that basement homes are super common. They are a huge expense on top, especially if the grading isn't as severe as what a builder would normally need in order to install a basement. Basements also typically are walkout basements. They're not the subterranean look that maybe our northeastern counterparts have. So when you're looking at that topography, one of the other two big costs that you need to think about is, am I going to have to install a retaining wall anywhere? For example, you may have your home situated just nice at the top of that hill. Think about your driveway. Your driveway, when you pour it, it's not just like you can pour it and then have that sloping drop off. You do need to kind of pack the soils in and help support that, or even install some kind of fence or gate if there's a large drop off at the end. So that retaining wall is an added cost. Is that going to fall on you, or is it going to fall on your builder? You want to make sure you're working in all of these little added costs into the contract to either finance it or you want to make sure that the builder is taking care of that should it come up. The other big one is the soils. So as you start building and the grading starts happening, sometimes you remove enough soil that you end up having a water issue, meaning the runoff is now not going in the way that you want. We see this sometimes happening more in existing communities than in a raw land situation. And typically that's where you have that slight grade that starts to happen from the first home down to the last one. So you might have to bring more dirt in. This is not potting soil or things that you can just go to Home Depot and kind of throw out into the yard. It's good quality dirt. So again, ask your builder, if we have to bring in more soils, who is that cost going to fall on? Is it a 50-50 split? Is that you? Is it me? Because these are the type of things that can pop up during the process that are out-of-pocket liquidated expenses that you want to be prepared for. And guys, keep in mind, anytime you are buying land or building a home, there is always going to be something that pops up that was unexpected. So you do want to kind of have a little retainer on the side of extra money just in case. So something else is your usage of the home. So it's kind of hard to think that far in advance of what the home will look like on the site, but we have 3 different types of foundations here. So keep in mind this video is focused on the pre-foundation stage. We will have another video that walks you through what that foundation looks like and what all of that setup kind of entails. But here in North Carolina, we have 3 different types of foundations. We have that basement home, like I just mentioned, we have a crawl space, and then we also have something called a slab. So a crawl space, think of it similar to a basement, but it's not finished. It is not livable, it's not heated square footage, you should not store anything down there, much less have people down there. And crawl spaces can literally be like shimmy on your belly, crawl level, so very tight fit. This is typical of older homes. Or in some cases, some of our newer homes, you can actually walk into the crawl space. They might be encapsulated. They might actually be temperature controlled, but again, you still don't want to use it for storing or living or anything like that. You also can see the underbelly of the home. So all the things like piping, insulation, those types of things are exposed. So then we flip to the slab. Think about it like just a thick piece of cement. Slab homes are very simple. There's not a whole lot to them other than the fact that you don't really have some maintenance and upkeep that you would have to monitor like you would in a crawl space where moisture can become an issue. But with slab homes, one of the 2 things that I would recommend kind of keeping in the back of your mind is if you make any additions or changes to plumbing. It is really tough with a slab home. You literally have to dig into the concrete and rip that up in order to make those adjustments. Another thing with slab homes to keep in mind is that we do have radon here in North Carolina, and in a slab home, the radon is going to go immediately into the living space because radon is heavier than air, and that heavy gas will sit there in that living space. So keep that in mind when you're trying to decide between the different types of foundations. Basement homes can be a little bit more expensive, but they do have a value add of access similar to crawl spaces, while slabs are a little bit more cost effective, but they can come with some issues down the line. The other thing too, when you're looking at placement, so think about where this home is located in relation to the other homes around it, as well as on the lot itself. So think about your driveway, for example. You want to see where that driveway is going to be positioned and then where the house is going to be positioned in relation to your neighbors. So think about like elevation factors, where are your windows going to align? Are your driveways and your garages potentially going to be nose to nose where every time you get in and out of your car, you're going to wave and see your neighbor? Some folks don't mind that. Some folks want a little bit of privacy. So that might also be something to talk to your builder about, is where the home is situated. Side load, front load, all the porches and all of those things. Another thing about your placement, when you're thinking about raw land, so now let's get out of the existing neighborhood and just look at the forest and the trees, right, that you've come across. You want to think about access. So with raw land, a lot of times folks think, okay, I'm going to place the house right smack dab in the middle of the 12 acres that I've now gone under contract on. You have to think about the road in order to get to where the home site's going to be. And this can get a little tricky because if you're talking about a septic system and soil suitability, the part of the land that perks may be in the back. However, that is a long driveway to have to create in order to get to the land that's actually usable. Those driveways can charge you anywhere from $50,000 up to a couple $100,000 depending on what type of rock you're using, if there are water retention issues, if you have to get over a stream of any type in order to get to said location. Putting in a culvert can actually be pretty complicated. So just keep this in mind that if you are buying raw land, you do want to take your due diligence process very slow and very seriously. Make sure you get soil suitability, you get your excavator guy out there, your builder, to really evaluate how that access is going to look and whether or not it's feasible for your pocketbook. Some folks don't have a problem putting a couple $100,000 for the access because that's where the house is and that's where they want it to be. However, for some folks, that completely shoots their budget and the land is no longer of the same value to that particular client. So keep in mind, land features are a huge deal when you are evaluating a piece of property, whether it's a lot or land. So it is tough, again, guys, to look at raw dirt and to think of all the things that you need to know and all of the things that you need to kind of have future forethought on. And that's where your agent can really be a huge value add to you. Make sure that you are using a buyer's agent, whether you're working with a builder directly or you're buying a piece of land outright. Either way, that agent is going to be able to guide you on the things you need to work into the contract, as well as the things that you need to think about that are going to cost you out-of-pocket costs down the road, and what tests to do to make sure this is the right property for you. So I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate. Be sure to stay tuned for the next episode in our new construction series, Building a Home, where we take you from start to finish in building that new home for you. We'll see you next time.